Good morning, everybody. Are we about ready to start? My name is Teresa Marchetta. I'm the Director of Strategic Communications and Media Policy for Mayor Michael B. Hancock, and it is our pleasure to be here. We're pretty excited about supporting the launch of an incredibly progressive and thoughtful and connected program, really the latest in a series coming from public safety. It's really just the next step, really, in a series of reforms that we have undertaken, including the deployment of body cameras, also the new use of force policies, increased contact and community engagement, just to name a few. So this is really just the next natural step in that progression. Executive Director Troy Riggs will be up here in just a few minutes to explain how this works and how he arrived at this program. First, though, I would like to introduce Mayor Michael B. Hancock to give you a little context as to how this new focus fits within the greater work of his administration.
Thank you, Teresa, and let me thank all of you for being here as well. I want to acknowledge the presence of two of our members of Denver City Council, Councilman Paul Cashman and Councilman Wayne New. Thank you both for being here. Would you give them a round of applause? And of course, our leadership of our safety departments are also here, as well as all of you who are our honored guests. But let me acknowledge the presence. You're going to hear from our Director of Safety, Troy Riggs. Eric Williams is our Deputy Director of Safety in the back there. Chief Paul Pazin, the Chief of Police, is here. We want to thank Chief Tade for being here as well. There you are, our Fire Chief. And of course, Sheriff Furman is here as well. Where's the sheriff? Up front here. They give our public safety leaders a round of applause, if you will. So since 2011, taking office, one of the questions we have always asked when it comes time to deploying critical initiatives or efforts in the city of Denver is really why. Why would we do this? Why is someone homeless? Why do we have crime in certain areas of town? Why are children in certain parts of Denver most vulnerable? Why? What's the why? Data-driven decision-making has become a hallmark of who we are as part of the Hancock administration and really how we approach a lot of our macro issues in the city of Denver. If you look at the Office of Economic Development, we ask the question, why would neighborhoods and our neighbors be subject to gentrification or displacement when development is occurring in their neighborhoods? It's more than just property tax rising. It may also be the lack of transportation mobility options. Could also be the challenge of workforce development and education. What are the contributing factors? The why. Children's Affairs asks, why are children in West Denver most vulnerable children we have in our city? And we look at incidents of teen pregnancy. We look at incidents of dropouts in the neighborhoods. We look at the challenge of the schools in a particular neighborhood. We look at the employability or the lack of working opportunities or employment opportunities for their parents. Denver Health and Public Health and Environment have taken a lens into the health and well-being of our residents in Denver, simply asking the question why. And in each of those departments that I just talked about, data has driven the design and the implementation of the programs that we have implemented throughout the city. As a result, we have seen greater impact. Greater results and outcomes for our initiatives in certain neighborhoods. When our neighborhoods are stronger, there tends to be a greater support for the government and a greater trust between the law enforcement and those neighbors. I met a kindred spirit when I met Troy Riggs last year, when he and I just had a conversation about public safety and the fact that we got to get beyond just police officers patrolling streets and start asking the question of why is crime higher in certain parts of the city as opposed to others. And Troy has a passion for data. In fact, we call him a data geek. And what he has done is he's taken the very vestiges of the values that we have implemented as part of our equity platform in Denver, the same data-driven mentality that Aaron Brown has implemented as part of Children's Affairs or Don Morris has implemented at Denver Human Services, and said we need to ask the question why. Why are certain demographics more prone, have a higher propensity for interaction with law enforcement and crime activity than others? Are certain neighborhoods more likely to have higher crime rates than others? And so today, I'm excited to bring him up to talk about the Opportunity Index, which is another extension of our equity platform in the city of Denver. There is no greater impact we can make than bringing data-driven decision-making to public safety. And under the leadership of Troy Riggs and the Opportunity Index, that's exactly what we're doing. Let's bring up Troy Riggs, our Director of Safety, to tell us all about it.
So it's been about a year that I arrived, and I do want to introduce my wife who is here today, Kara. She showed up. She told me that she was going to come this morning, and I said, yes, ma'am. So she's here, and I appreciate her journey to take us to Denver. Thank you. And if I may, I will say this. The mayor mentioned our first conversation we had in July of 2017, and at the time I was looking at data of the 50 largest cities in the United States, and we were having a conversation about Denver and all the prosperity, and I would say, echo what he said, a kindred spirit. And actually what the mayor didn't know at that time, I was looking at other cities and looking at getting back into public safety. I was missing the service, missing helping victims, missing coordinating. And after meeting the mayor, I dropped out of other searches because I was hoping that he would call, and sure enough, Penny May and Alan Salazar, they called me, and next thing I know is I looked at my wife and I said, hey, let's go to Denver. And surprisingly to me, she said, absolutely, and so we moved out, and we've been very glad to be here. And it's after a year, it's so good to see so many good friends. And I will say to you here today that do all these nonprofit works, and for my fellow directors in the departments, thank you for the work you do. We're trying to learn from you in public safety, and that's what this Denver Opportunity is about, is trying to help other individuals. But back to the conversation the mayor and I had. We looked at data when I was looking at the top 50 cities, and I have to tell you, Denver blows other cities away. Denver is at the top of almost every category, every positive category that you can come up with, they're at the top. But the mayor and I talked about other cities that were struggling, and we talked about large areas of poverty. Large areas where people just can't get out of poverty. And we see those in major cities across America, big cities like Denver. And that's, I think, the greatest threat to our cities, and it's also, I think, the greatest threat to our nation, people not having the opportunity that other individuals coming to this country have had in the past. So we sat down, and the mayor and I looking at this, but what really got me thinking about coming to Denver and really passionate was what I heard the mayor say in our meeting. And what you've heard him say time and time again, and as I joined Team Hancock, heard him talk more and more about this. And we can't forget those left behind by Denver's recent prosperity, because the vision of the Denver Opportunity Index is really the vision of the mayor. In the midst of our unprecedented prosperity, we will never realize our full potential until all of our residents have an opportunity to succeed. And that's important, and we need to believe that, and I know the people of Denver believe that. And before I get into some of the data, and we talk a little bit more, let me just say this. There's some troublesome data in the city of Denver. But when we compare ourselves to other cities, we are doing remarkably well. But we're not competing against other cities right now. We're trying to enhance the quality of life of our residents. We should never be satisfied if we have one small area of abject poverty. And that's why I'm glad you're here today. So what is the Denver Opportunity Index? Data-driven, obviously. I guess I'll take that data geek. But what I also want to do is I want to make data operational. And we need to work with nonprofits, faith-based organizations within the Department of Public Safety. And we have to be able to coordinate that activity if we want to get to the root causes of crime, or root causes of the degradation of quality of life, and not just the symptoms. That's what we're focused on with this Denver Opportunity Index. So we have 3 pillars of focus. As we sat down and we researched and we looked at what was going on across the nation and some of the research that has been accomplished, we really said there's 3 pillars of pillars of focus that we need to focus on as a department. And that's financial security, health, and people left behind. Individuals ask me all the time, why is that important to public safety? Because I'll tell you, if you're struggling with finances, if you're having trouble with health, and you feel like you're not getting a fair shake, that is an area of our community that's ripe for high crime rates, a degradation in quality of life, and in unsafe conditions. So if we're serious about long-term public safety, we need to change our mindset. And as the mayor talked about what's the future of public safety, we want to be at the forefront of that initiative, more so than what other cities are doing. So our team that's here today that did incredible work started asking themselves some questions regarding these different areas. When we talk about financial security, what's poverty rates look like? What's food insecurity look like for individuals? When we talk about health, really in public safety, we want to be focused on two things. We want to be focused on mental health issues, and we want to be focused on dependency issues. And sometimes, about 50% of the time, according to Denver Health, they go hand in hand in this city. So we have to be aware of that. People left behind, is it our immigrant population? Is it people who lived here their entire lives in Denver that feel like that they're being left behind? What about those reentrants coming from jail? What are we doing to ensure that they have a smooth transition back to society? These are some of the questions that we asked ourselves, and then we decided that if we're going to do this, we need to look at what is going on in Denver right now. Now, we have a lot more data than this, but this is some of the data that our team, and most of them are here in the auditorium today. But when you look at the 5-year average, and the good thing is we believe the federal poverty line is even lower today than the 17%, but this is a 5-year average for comparison. That's important for us to know, obviously. People ask me sometimes, why is property crime considered a financial issue? And I'll tell you why. If you live in an area that you're struggling financially, and you've been able to save enough money to purchase some type of transportation, or you've been able to save enough money to buy your family a home computer, where that your kids can get on social media, where they can do their schoolwork, and it gets stolen, that's a life-altering event. That's not to many of us here today. Car gets stolen, can't get to work. Computer gets stolen, education slips. That's a life-altering event. 36.5% of our families can't afford housing. Look at violent crime. Why is that a health issue? People ask me all the time. We think of victims, we think of homicide. Someone's murdered, it ends there. It doesn't end there. There's secondary, tertiary people that are being involved and victimized. Families are disrupted as a result. People that are victims of crime have long issues and long-term issues. We have to be aware of that. So we have to look at violent crime. We spend a lot of time in the United States talking about murders. When you look at the numbers of almost every major city, there will be more drug-related deaths and suicide deaths individually than there will have murders. We have to be aware of that. If we're concerned about public safety and the well-being of our citizens, we have to be aware. Now, the next slide, or the next number may surprise you. In a city doing so well, we still have almost 65,000 people that are not receiving the mental health care that they deserve to keep them balanced so that they can be productive. Let's look at those left behind. I'll start with the educational levels. Why are educational levels? Because it's the number one thing that we can denote that tells if you're going to be left behind or not. If you do not have a high school diploma and you compare yourself with somebody with a college degree, poverty difference between those two groups is about 20%. 20%, especially in a city like this city that is technology driven. When you look at the amount of money made in a lifetime between a high school graduate, college graduate, it's about $1 million over a lifetime. So that's why we have that put in this macro data. This is macro data, just a brief look at the Denver. We've seen all the good numbers. These are some of the numbers that we have to focus on in public safety if we want to move forward. But I can tell you this, we can't make this operational. You can't make macro data operational unless you take it to a micro level so that we can understand what's going on in neighborhoods. Because when we look at cities across the nation, and here in Denver as well, we will have poverty, we will have crime, property crime, and violent crime usually in smaller pockets. And that's what we're seeing across the nation, large areas of high unemployment, large areas where people are losing jobs or jobs aren't being replenished, large areas where people are struggling with poverty and they're struggling with crime. So we want to get down to the micro level, and this is where I'm really proud of our data team. Because what they've done is they have looked at the 100 square miles, we exclude the airport, the 100 square miles where most people live in Denver, and there's 142 census tracts. If you look at each one of these census tracts, we want to start analyzing variables in each one of these pillars that I've mentioned to understand what people are dealing with in an area in less than a square mile. So our team, which is I think pretty impressive, has already put together where they can give you data pretty much at any location you want to give us. We can give you the data of what's going around in 3 pillars, and we'll give you an overview of that in a moment. We also are able to tell you now, remember, we're not competing against other cities, we're competing against ourselves. So we want to know who has the most opportunity in the city and who has the least opportunity in the city. If you have high poverty rates, if you have the highest poverty rate in the city, you're going to rank 142nd on the opportunity index because you have less opportunity than anyone else. If you rank number one, then that means you have the least amount of poverty and you have more opportunity as a result. We want to move everybody up as we look at this data over time. So the teams worked very hard to break it down. Let me give you an example. We are going to do a listen and learn tour pretty soon, and I'll talk more about that in a moment, in an area near this location. This is you can see the location, the census tract where it borders, median age 31. There's 6,400 citizens and residents in this area. 6,400. When we break it down, we start with our first pillar of financial security. So remember, each one of our 142 census tracts has it broken down this way. Look at this census tract. Now we're going to do a little analysis now of census tracts, because if we're going to be involved in improving people's life, we got to understand what they're dealing with. We got to understand what their living condition is. So in this census tract, it's 39%. Look at the ranking. There is only 6 census tracts that have higher poverty in the entire city than this census tract, where 6,400 human beings live. Median household income, it's lower. Look at property crime per 1,000 residents. That means when you break it down in this area, there is a property crime in an area with low median income, high poverty. There is a property crime every day and a half. Now it's starting to paint the picture of what we're dealing with in this area. Our next slide deals with health. I'll start because people always ask the question, why do you have physical activity on there? Because we've learned from you that if people have more physical activity, it helps with their mental health issue. It helps with their condition in life. And that's why the team put it in. But look at mental distress. 10% across the city, 11% in this area. Now, what we're finding out is mental health issues are everywhere. But in an area that has a lot of resources, they can get services for mental health. Now we know that we have a mental health issue in this area, and if it's 10%, we're talking about 650 plus people that have a mental health disorder that they probably don't have the funding to deal with. So now we're painting a picture of not just the knowledge of the data, but an understanding of what human beings are going through in this area. When you look at violent crime, that is a violent crime in that area every 3.5 days. Think about it, every 3.5 days. So every day and a half you have a property crime, every 3.5 days you have a violent crime. This is a situation that citizens are facing in this area and gives us an opportunity to get involved and help improve their lives. People left behind. Once again, we give the education levels. I've explained that. The last one I'll explain is the number of community facilities. If we as a Department of Public Safety, doing this for the first time and looking at this data and relying on our nonprofit and faith-based organizations to assist us, we need to know how many areas in these communities that we can utilize for services. So we start tracking those. We believe in some, there may not be any service providers there, that we're going to have to do something different. We'll have to have a different approach. So as you can see, every census tract can be different. We're also looking at expanding where we look at clustering, where we're looking at numerous census tracts together and giving numbers for that. That's a 2019 initiative that we'll talk about in a moment. So here's the phases. We're going to be holding listening and learning tours, because one thing I have learned in 30 years of doing this is that data can only tell you so much. The residents that live in those areas, those of you that are in there providing services, those churches that are out there can tell us much more and help us have a better response to meeting the needs of the residents in those communities. We want to meet with community organizations and share specific census data for where their organization is located. And we have an action item we'll show you in a minute that we're going to complete by the end of the year. The second phase is take that community input, fully vet, and build out the Denver Opportunity Index. So for the first time in the history of this city, all public safety agencies are having the same conversation with the same data, and we're having that same conversation with the nonprofits and faith-based communities, using the same data sets, the same terminologies to make sure that we are working together in a cohesive way. And I have to brag on Chief Pazin. Chief Pazin talks a lot about precision policing. And precision policing is exactly what we're talking about, meeting some of the social needs, but also going in and finding out that handful of people that live in this area that are causing individuals issues, that are the main reasons for crime. Because what we also learn by data is most of the people that live in these areas are not criminals. They're just trying to make ends meet, but it allows for a handful of people to move in there. And I think it's pretty far-reaching that our chief is talking about policing model that it doesn't begin with arrest, it begins with services and partners, but includes arrest to take those individuals that are harming the community, the ones that the community are pointing to. You'll hear more about that in 2019. In 2020, this is a pretty robust goal, but 2020, we want to start building our budgets. Laura here is our deputy director. She handles the budget, the most talented individual I've ever seen in this world in public safety, so I'm grateful for her expertise. And how do we tie goals and objectives to our budget? Because I'm a big believer in what we measure gets accomplished. And we're going to be building that out, and that process, they've already started that process now. It's going to take us a couple of years to get there, then get ready for the new data sets that's coming in 2020. I want to make this clear. This is not an initiative. This is not a program. I kind of seize up when I hear people say that. This is a philosophical shift in the way we do business. The fire department under our Chief Tate, is going to continue to improve the fire department. Sheriff Furman is going to continue to improve the Sheriff's Department. What we're talking about is public safety. How can we start working more collaboratively on some of these issues in some of these areas? Because this data that we're seeing is affecting all of our departments, all of our 4,500 employees. So here's some of the things we want to do by the end of the year. Big lift, but I will tell you, people are already working on this. We want to develop a volunteer model for the Department of Public Safety. We have 4,500 employees, and the mayor has graciously allowed us to have people volunteering in the community on duty as long as it doesn't adversely affect public safety on that day. What will that do for us? That will allow us to learn more about the situations people are living in, but it'll also allow us to forge partnerships that we don't have right now. And that's part of Chief Pazin's policing model. We're looking into jail. Can we get people, hold them accountable, but get them in jail and out of jail quickly so they don't lose their job and fall into poverty? That's something that's important. That's valuable work. And we want to provide our first responders with with information regarding some of the resources that are nearby. Here's what we see time and time again. Our first responders show up to a home. It's in crisis. They're looking for someone to help them. And if you don't have that information available right then, a couple days pass, and the urgency's not there, if we can get that information to them instantaneously, tell them about some of your organizations that you're doing, maybe they'll get help for their dependency issue. Maybe they'll start getting help with mental health issue. Maybe they didn't realize that there was a food center nearby. When we look at health, we're talking about expanding our mental and behavioral health models within the Department of Safety. I want us to be able to identify it as we go out in the streets, but I also want our workforce to have a better understanding of mental health issues because it affects our workforce too, and identifying that and valuing our workforce as well. Chief Tate has been a big proponent of MedUnit and what he's doing with his MedUnit and providing more adequate services. How do we expand that over time? It's efficient and effective. Chief has some great ideas there. We want to support him. We think it'll help in some of these areas. And then here's one of the real big ones, and Laura, once again, is leading the charge on this, is starting to look at data and trying to find out who are the multiple users of our services. So I want to give you an example today. Every day someone calls, I see Athena back here, every day you get mental health calls, correct? And every day they have to dispatch a couple police cars. Every day they may have to dispatch 4 firefighters on a rig to go for basic life support. Somebody may go to jail, but it involves the sheriff's department. Someone may go to the hospital. That's a lot of resources this city's tying up every day because someone has a mental health hold. 65,000, remember, did not get services in this city, or not the services they need. So we make all those runs. If we start identifying people that are currently using our system repeatedly, and we send people there early, maybe it's officers and the clinicians that go early. Maybe it's one of those med units that the fire chief's going to build, but they go early and try to ascertain what the problem is when they're not in crisis. If we can keep that person out of crisis, think about the impact that's going to have on the budget for public safety in our workforce. But more importantly, that keeps somebody out of crisis every few days. That's our ultimate goal by doing this. And then not to belabor, but to look at some of the people left behind, we're doing a Director for a Day program. We've already had the immigrant community. We will continue to build that program. We've had the Mexican Consulate General and the Peru Consulate General that attended. The Mexican Consulate General services 250 people a day. It's almost up to 500 during the holidays, and they've asked for our department to come out and present this data to showcase to those clients that we care about their well-being and that it's okay to work with us. Because as we all know, the mayor is a huge supporter of immigrants, and that's something that they want us to share because still some immigrants are fearful to come to us. And then I want to end on this slide with talking about cultural sensitivity. We do a lot of culture sensitivity training in public safety. But one of the things that I have realized is that our 4,500 employees need to realize this as well, is that we don't understand all cultures. And I have seen, and I've made this mistake, where we've gone the wrong way on offering services, or we have gone the wrong way on investigations, critical investigations, because we simply didn't understand the culture when we walked into an area. We want to understand those cultures better. We think the training will help. We think also the volunteering in certain areas of this community will help a great deal with that as well. I don't want to go over this. I mean, we have Don and Aaron and just numerous, Derek, everybody in the room from the city. The city's been doing a lot of this work way before public safety got on board. So we're trying to learn from them. We're going to be leaning on them. We're going to be volunteering. We're going to be sharing information. We're going to be asking for assistance and guidance. But obviously, when the mayor talks about his equity platform, this is part of it here. And now public safety is getting involved as well. Here's our listening learning tours. Where's Michael? He's here. Michael Sapp. I think everybody knows Michael is going to be leading these. We're going to do listening learning tours on each one of the 3 pillars so people can, once again, remember what I said, I want them to have the knowledge of the data, but I want them to have the understanding of what people are living, or what people are living each and every day. So financial security. I want people to understand what those numbers of poverty are in the city, what they are in a census tract, but also what's it like to live paycheck to paycheck? What's it like to live having to skip a meal? Same thing for living with mental health issues, or if you feel like you don't know where to turn if you live in this city or you're a new immigrant or you're a re-entrant, what are you going through? And then we want to do as many presentations as the community will ask for. That we are going to be in neighborhoods, we're going to be at nonprofits, we're going to be at churches, and we want to share the data surrounding your nonprofit, your church, your neighborhood, and start working with you on how do we better respond as a Department of Public Safety. So here's how to contact us. I appreciate your attentiveness, and I'm going to stick around. Michael's going to stick around if you have any individual questions that you'd like to follow up on. We have Laura and Sean and Zach and everybody in the back here that can answer questions. Armando, we have a lot here. But let me just end this. People ask me all the time, and I always get this question, so I think it's important to share today. Why am I so passionate about these issues? And I'll tell you why I'm so passionate. Because when I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, in a small 800 square foot home, same home my father grew up in. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. We had a little floor furnace with a crate. I don't know if you ever had seen one of those, but if you stood on with your tennis shoes, you'd burn your tennis shoes. And that was our heat. We didn't have air conditioning for like, I don't know how many years, hot and humid there. It's not Colorado weather, I can promise you. But it was a great upbringing. I know it sounds odd, great upbringing. Had a mom and dad that loved me, had a church family, had a decent education in school, had some great teachers. But something that I learned in school that always stuck with me about our great nation is the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, the Declaration of Independence. You look at that declaration, any freedom-loving people across the nation uses that Declaration of Independence. Any freedom-loving people around the world will hold that Declaration of Independence in high esteem, and I was proud of that growing up and still am. But I also realized as I got older that we didn't always live up to that Declaration of Independence. I realized that some great men and women had to challenge the nation and had to call it to repentance when you looked at we weren't living up to the bedrock of our foundation. So 30 years of doing public safety, 30 years of doing it in the United States, having tremendous opportunities and seeing right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Here's the important part, is I had opportunities that some of these kids don't. I want to do something about it. Thank you for being here.